Hello guys, welcome to Python and Machine Learning Daily. Today we will implement a solution for a real Upwork project which is no longer available, but that doesn't matter, but which would pay $40 to transform the JSON with Python script and add additional value to each item of that JSON. This video will be a bit more detailed and longer than usual because I want to take you on a journey step by step how I would tackle that project, and more importantly, problems that arise along the way, because the data set isn't ideal, the requirements from the client are often misleading or lack some details, so I want you to see the real situation in real life scenario that Python projects or any dev projects, to be honest, are not only about the code. So we will write the code, face the problem, overcome that problem, and iterate until success. So our original JSON is this. So our original JSON file is this. It's a list of voices with language and gender, female or male. And our goal is to pick a name by gender and by country, which is language code. And the client even specified the library, the source of names, which is names dataset here, which is funny enough taken from Facebook leak that happened in the past. So someone compiled that data into just list of first names of people by country. So my first initial reaction to this task was, how hard can it be? You iterate through JSON, you pick the name from that data set, and you save it. That's it. But the reality was a bit more complicated. Let's go step by step. The first part, read the JSON, modify the data, and save it. Just with empty name. But from here you would learn how to work with JSONs in Python. So we import the JSON, we load that file with open. So this returns the file object, and then we load that file object, and then we print how many voices are there in total with f strings, and then we just iterate through items and assign a real new value to that dictionary. So each line is a dictionary again with that JSON. So this is a dictionary, and that dictionary will have a new element of name, empty for now. And then later in here we'll have logic from that names dataset. And then to write the JSON into a new file, we just go JSON dump, and this one is quite important for readability. So if we launch that script now, it is successful and really fast because we don't do any transformations, 468 voices, and if we open that result JSON, this is the result. Formatted, this is what is done by that indent for, in comparison to the original JSON, which is just in one line, not formatted for readability. And then each item has name empty, name empty, name empty. So yeah, we've done the first part, read and write JSON. Now the second step is to actually get those names from that names dataset. And this is the code, and I will comment that in a minute, but basically what we're doing according to the documentation of that names dataset, we do pip install names dataset, which I have already done behind the scenes, and then we can get the top names, for example, from gender and country. And I've chosen a logic of getting 5 names, 5 most popular ones, and then getting random name from that list. And the first thing I tried was this, getting names dataset, and then for each of the voices, get random names according to the specification and the documentation, and then random choice from those. And for that, we also need import random on top. And then I encountered the first issue. The original JSON contains language and language code, and I thought this would be the parameter for names dataset. Apparently, names dataset accepts country code and not language code. The original task from the client on Upwork mentioned that JSON has country name and voice gender. I guess that the client didn't even realize that himself. So I have a new task now, transforming this language code into the country code accepted by that names dataset. For that, I found another library, Python library called langcodes, which gives us the territory. It's called territory country by language codes. So it works with codes like this or that. It looks like this. After pip install that library, from langcodes import everything, and then these 2 lines are all we need. We have our language code, we create a language object from that and then get the territory into a variable which we then can use as a parameter random names. Now, if we try to launch that, we will see our next issue. First, it takes quite a while to load that names dataset, around 5 seconds or so. And then our problem is that random names is not just a list of names. It has its own structure. This structure is already in the documentation of names dataset. This is the one. So we need the list. So we need to transform the country name and gender's first letter, and only then we'll have the list that we can pick the random item from. So we need random names, then country, and then gender's first name, which is exactly that, item, gender, title, so uppercase, and then the first letter, because Python treats strings as lists, and you can have the 0th, which is the first element, the first letter. Okay, if we launch that, again, it takes some time to load the names dataset, and then the result is our next issue. The country is identified as XA, but there are no random names by XA. So the thing is, in that names dataset, not all the countries of the world are present. 105 countries or regions, and then XA, in our case, represents Arabic, but there's no country according to that identifier. In other words, no names for that country in that specific dataset. So this one, ZA, was successful, and then this one, the second line, threw an error. Now, how do we deal with that? At this point, all we can do is add an if statement here if there are random names for that country. And then we need to ask the client what to do in that situation, what to do with those names, or what could be a different source of data. So I did exactly that and then added a few things on top. First, found variable, which means how many records were actually found. I increment that only if there are random names. And also, to see the progress, I will print processing voice number and then iteration. For that, we introduce enumerate, and then we have iteration variable. And then at the end, what I forgot is print found number of voices. Now, let's launch another attempt and see what we have. Do we have errors? Do we have something else? So again, it takes quite a while to read the data, but then processing voice, number after number, and we'll see if it is all successful for 400 or it stops somewhere with an error. Okay, we have an error after a minute or so of waiting, and 407 successful iterations, 408 through an error of keyword none of country, which means that in some case country is none. There's no territory by item language code. So then we add another if statement. If country, then we proceed. Otherwise, let's see what was that language code that was not found. And to avoid long waiting, I just picked the voices from 400 and the first. And if we launch, we will see which country, which language code causes the issue. Or in fact, we have another error, but since we added if else, this is our else with printed exception and then script moved on executing. So now we have language code ARB, which is Arabic, but lang codes library doesn't have the code for that. Again, we need to ask the client what to do in that case, but meanwhile we need to proceed with records that we can identify. And our next error is on the line 420th, which is invalid gender value. And I wonder what is invalid gender value. So let's actually try to do, for example, 411th and then show that gender, for example, print item gender, like this. So let's execute now, and this is our error. Apparently there is not just male and female, but there's also female child. Again, this is one of those cases that we find out something about the data in the middle of the data set, which is not at all mentioned by the client. And that's why I'm shooting this video as a longer step by step, because you see how many steps are appearing only during your coding. So the original task by client for $40 of how hard can it be actually becomes harder. And then of course it's your choice to negotiate with the client and stuff like that. This is outside of this topic. But quite often the data sets for Python data processing are far from being ideal. So the next step is to transform the gender into this. So splitting by dash and taking only the first part, which is actually male or female, and then I've put the title here to avoid that repeating in the few places below. So we have gender and gender first character here. Let's launch once again and see if it is successful now. Okay, another error on the voice number 18, which is actually something like 428. Yep, something like that. Now, language code. What is the error? If we scroll down, WLS is out of place. So something is wrong with that language code. Let's print out that thing. See another step. So print item language code. So where does that WLS come from? We relaunch and we see all those coming up, and this is, oh, interesting. So we have EN-US, and this is again non-standard thing. I guess it stands for EN Great Britain and then Wales, but again, lang codes library cannot parse that properly. At this point, I decided to not add another if statement, but instead add TryAccept. Basically, if something goes wrong, it would show us the exception, but still proceed with the date. So this is the code. Try all of that block with everything, and then accept base exception, which means any exception in Python basically. We print the error and we print the full item, so you would see, or the client would see in the end, what went wrong. And then with that data, we can go to the client and ask them. So we launch again. At some point, we should see that exception coming, right? And then maybe it will be successful. Yes, we have the number 53, and finally we should have the JSON. Let's take a look at that. Result JSON. Let's close that one. And we have name Peter by Dutch language. We have the name Monique by Dutch again. English Australian for some reason didn't work. But we have Lisa for British. We have Laura. We have Priya for Indian. So it kind of works. So let's finally relaunch that all on the full dataset without any filtering and see how many voices are actually being found. This one. Okay, it is finished in roughly 2 minutes or so, and the result is 424 out of 468, which means that 46 names were not found for whatever reason. So then our final step would be, I will not do that in this video, would be to populate those not found names and the reasons, and then give that list to the client and then ask what to do with those. So in this video, what I wanted to show you, and I will by the way put that code on GitHub so you can play around with it yourself. I wanted to show you the story, the real story of performing such data transformation tasks, and along the way you may have learned something around names dataset and lang code, so those two libraries, how to work with JSONs, how to work with TryAccept, with some string operations like this one, strings and list, how to take random choice, how to print out exceptions, for example, like this. Did you know that trick? That you can print 50 characters like this? And yeah, you may have heard random tips and tricks along the way. So what do you think about this? Would you have done anything differently? Let's discuss in the comments below. And if you want more practical projects and tips like this one in this video, subscribe to the channel. I will keep shooting more videos based on as much as possible on real projects from Upwork and elsewhere. That's it for this time, and see you guys in other videos.